I thought I'd just start out with a couple of quotes out of Sparks. Not that these have anything to do with Khorshed, but it's because they have to do with Baba. So I thought I'd start out with a couple of these. And these quotes deal with God. So, from the beginningless beginning, I asked one question. Who am I? And I gave one answer. I am God. God is beyond understanding. The moment you think you understand God, you misunderstand Him. You miss Him when you try to understand Him. God is everywhere and does everything. God is within us and knows everything. God is without us and sees everything. God is beyond us and is everything. And then finally, God cannot be explained. God can only be lived. And I think that's a great jumping off point for a talk about Khorshed, because when it came to being with Baba and loving Baba, that was her experience. Khorshed met Meher Baba when she was just 12, and from that point on she wanted to spend every moment with him and could not bear to be away from him. So what I would like to do is to start off and just see by people showing their hands how many people met Khorshed. Many of you. And how many people had a chance to hear and get to know her and her stories? A little bit. Okay. And what I'd like to do is, if anybody has any questions, I'd like to hear the questions, and then I can do my best to weave some answers, if I even know them, into the talk. And then what I'll do is I'll start out by talking about how the book was put together, and then tell some stories from the book. So, does anybody have any questions about Khorshed? Yes?
Can you just review who she was? I know she's one of the Mandalay.
I'd be happy to. That's a great place to start. Who was Khorshed? And Khorshed was one of Meher Baba's close female disciples. And she, not counting Mani, who was Baba's sister, but Khorshed was one of the first young women to meet, of the close disciples to meet Meher Baba. She even met Baba before Meher. And in the ashram in the early days, because she was one of the first women there, she was really Meher's best friend.
Well, she's a cousin, wasn't she cousin?
She was also a cousin, that's right, because Rustam married Freni, Baba's sister. Rustam was Adi Sr.'s brother, and that was Khorshed's cousin. So they were cousins through marriage. Khorshed was actually related to Baba on both sides of her family, which was very interesting, through grandparents and great-grandparents. Any other questions? I got that one, so we got one down.
All right.
Yes.
Khorshed also heard Baba's voice and heard him singing.
Yes, she did.
Right.
Because she moved to Meherabad right at the beginning, and Baba was still speaking then.
Yeah.
Yes, that's absolutely right.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
You said she moved to Meherabad? And
Right, with Mera.
okay.
In the early days, they had started out in Kushru quarters. They had been called from Mera from Pune, Khorshed from Bombay, and they were staying in Kushru quarters, and then Baba had them making shirts for the iron gown villagers.
And you said she came what age?
12, when she was 12, yeah. Just after her birthday in May. They were celebrating Upasni Maharaja's birthday on a grand scale in Sakori. Baba wanted that to happen. And so, along with Gulmai, Sunamasi, Khorshed's mother, they bought a whole bunch of supplies for that celebration, and they caught the train to Sakori from Ahmednagar, and Baba was on the train from Pune, and that's where she met him. So that's probably a good story to tell, how she met him. Yes?
And I'm a few minutes late, so forgive me, maybe you already covered this. I have heard reference to big Khorshed, small Khorshed. What's the difference?
Right. The Khorshed that I'm talking about is small Khorshed, and it's the difference is in age. Big Khorshed, I believe, was Jamshed, Baba's brother's wife. And so you know how everybody's named Kaikushu, right? And there's so many people with the same names. Rustam, which Rustam are we talking about? It's the same thing with Khorshed, and Khorshed was referred to as small Khorshed, just from an age standpoint.
And Baba gave her that, if I'm not mistaken. That was the reference Baba used for her. Small Khorshed.
That much I don't know. It could be. Baba had a sign for Khorshed, which was and because she had this sign and that referred to her nose, and Khorshed said, not nose, Baba, rose. Great question. Any others? Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about how the book was developed. The first time I went to India was in 1994 for Amartizi, and I was a fresh newbie, fresh off the plane. My luggage had been lost. Actually, and a Baba lover had given me $600 in cash, which had been in my luggage.
Oh, no.
And I had no idea that it had been there, and so that's why I put the gift that they had for the mandali in my suitcase, and it was gone.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's what I said, and
Never to be found again?
never to be found, but it got back to the mandali, the money. Anyway, the reason I raise it is because Mayor Nush's husband, Carrie, gave me clothing because I had nothing, which was very sweet. So my first Baba t-shirt actually came from Mayor Nush's husband, Carrie, and that was the thing. I wore that until it wore out. So,
Or Mary Nush that's with us?
yes,
Oh, okay.
yeah. And anyway, my first time, and I was a newbie, looked very lost. A friendly fellow named Tony Griss, who you may know.
Infinite Grace.
Infinite Griss, right? Took me under his wing and said, "Oh, there's this mandali member. Nobody knows her. You ought to meet her." So he took me to. I said, "Really? Okay." And so he took me to Meher Nazar, the trust compound, and he walked me into where Khurshid lived. Now, have you? Who has been to where Khurshid lived? Okay, so pardon, not Bombay, but in Khushru quarters.
Okay, sorry.
So she lives in Khushru quarters, 2 rooms with Sudam and his family. So it was Khurshid, Asha, Sudam, and the 2 daughters living in 2 rooms in Khushru quarters. And this one was for years, because she moved there in the 80s. Anyway, I walked in. There's this tube light, and there's Khurshid, and Khurshid was like 4'11", right? And she was sitting on the bed, and she couldn't see. She had cataracts. And anyway, she greeted me, and I sat down, and when I saw her, when I met her, I saw this halo around her head. It was a thin gold band. I don't remember a lot about what she said, quite honestly. I was just overwhelmed with her presence, and but that gold band, that halo, stayed there for the whole half-hour meeting. She told me a little story about how she knew Baba liked flowers, and I'd be happy to tell that one. Gave me some prasad, and I was on my way. But that was the start, and then she invited me back. I started recording her lectures, and then in 1997 she asked me to write a book about her life. I have no idea why, but that's what happened. So this was published in 2017, 20-year project. I remember talking with Heather halfway through the book, because Bob will know, you're halfway through these books, you don't know if they're going to get written or not, right? You're halfway through, it's a mess, you don't know, and Anyway, Heather said to me, "Oh, don't worry about it." I said, "Well, we spent 10 years on it already." Heather said, "Oh, don't worry about it. Every good Baba book takes 20 years." I said, "Oh." And 20 years to the year this was published. There was a lot of great help that we received. David Fenster, Ward Parks. When the going got rough, who are you going to call? Ward and David, because they know so much. Steve Klein worked on this book. Steve Klein was very helpful in streamlining the stories. Fair McKay, does anybody know Fair?
Sure.
Fair, masters in Urdu poetry from Yale, brilliant editor. She did a lot of the initial editing in terms of getting the stories consolidated. Judy Robertson did a lot of work. Judy was a great historian. So this book, now Khorshed told her stories and they were straight from the heart. But in terms of remembering dates and details about that, you know, that's not always the easiest thing to do when it's a 70-year-old memory, right? So we did a lot of research to make sure that the historical dates were good. There are times when Khorshed's version of the story did not coincide with Lord Mayhare or other things, and we kept Khorshed's version. Now, the other thing I want to mention, one of the things that, for those of you who met Khorshed, you all know Khorshed, right? She met Baba when she was 12, and from then on she wanted to be with Baba. She just longed to be with Baba. And so Baba, when he set up Manzili Meem in Bombay, they were 10 minutes walk from Khorshed's family's home. And Baba asked Khorshed to come to Manzili Meem every day. So Khorshed was walking to Manzili, would go to school, and then would go to Manzili Meem, and she would be there after school, and she loved it. She spent time with Gustaji. She could only speak with Gustaji and with Baba. None of the other men. Even though a lot of the early male disciples were actually her relatives, she couldn't talk to them at all. And so, aside from the situations that created, but she just longed to be with Baba, and as the months progressed, her interest in school just went to nothing. So Khorshed would come up with creative reasons why she shouldn't have to go to school. How she felt ill, sick to her stomach, and just had to go to Manzili Meem and get nursed by Baba. And he would serve her tea. So her longing was so strong, and eventually she quit school that very year. And so English was actually Khorshed's fourth language, right? She had the Indian languages, but English was her fourth language, which she learned after she came to Baba. So as you might imagine, when Khorshed told her stories, she had a very innovative way of saying things in English, but the vocabulary was a little limited, and the sentence structure was interesting, and so a lot of our work was to smooth out the language. And so Fair's poetry skills, Judy's strong writing skills, I'm a journal editor also, and we worked it. We really worked the language, and in fact, around that 10-year mark, we had an initial version of the book, and we took it to Meru to proofread. And because Meru was also Khorshed's cousin, right? And Meru said, "This is not good enough. You've got to rewrite it." So I think that's when Heather gave me that talk actually. I was like, oh my God, you know.
Because you were giving up at that point.
I was like,
I'm done.
Because it didn't sound like her voice, right? It didn't sound
No,
good enough, or why?
it wasn't good enough English. The Mandali wanted the books to sound good, and
It does.
and it was very good. It was very good guidance. I don't know if you know this, but Judy Robertson actually worked for Shambhala Press working on a whole bunch of Buddhist texts. So she's actually a very, very talented editor. And so we worked this language after Meru gave us that guidance, and we did a lot of editing. What has been gratifying, because what has been gratifying is that people have said this is very accessible language in this book. And that's very gratifying to us, and especially people who have met Khurshid said, "Oh, you kept her voice." That's Baba, man, because we did our best, and we
It's
sweated.
beautiful.
We sweated the details. I cannot tell you how. We spent weeks talking about where Khorshed lived in Mumbai and who lived in the household with Khorshed. I mean, we went to the details, and it took time, and so here it is.
Can I ask you,
Yeah.
who were the two men you said she was allowed to talk to?
I'm sorry,
What, Manzalamine, who were the two?
Gustaji and Baba,
And Baba.
because Baba was speaking then, right, in Manzalamine,
Wow.
and so that was it. So, let's talk about, are there any other questions before we move on? Yes, sir.
And just a little aside, that the little prompting that I got, Elizabeth in the early days, Elizabeth Patterson at the center, not every photo of Baba was worth being put up. Not photos, paintings.
Yeah.
If it didn't represent Baba in the most perfect way, she didn't want it. The photos were all fine. That thought came to me with this. The book had to be perfect. But Elizabeth wanted, as I saw it back then, the appeal of a painting was not just because the artist said this is Baba. It had to have some kind of an appeal that people would appreciate, that they would be touched by. That's the sense I get from your book.
Oh, that's very sweet.
Dana,
Yes, Jane.
Did she talk to you about the song Ishtiyaki that Baba wrote and sang in her house?
Yes, I believe so. And I will try to remember that story.
Sorry.
So let's talk about how Khorshed met Baba. And so the book actually starts out before Khorshed's birth because it was a very auspicious birth with Kaikushu, her father, had done the circle, 40 days and 40 nights without eating or sleeping. He had done that, and he had wanted to be able to follow, to focus on his spirituality rather than to focus on taking care of the family. Her father had so many responsibilities because his father had passed away. So her father had his wife, his three other siblings, and his wife to take care of. His mother, his wife, and his three other siblings. He was responsible for this whole family, and he had no time for spiritual life. So he did this chilla with the wish to be able to earn enough money to be able to take care of everybody so he could focus on spirituality. And when he did the chilla, he made it for, you have to go for 40 days, he made it for 38 days.
Wow.
And then, as Khorshed tells the story, and then he needed a little nap. So he fell asleep, and when he fell asleep, he had a dream. And this dream was the goddess Lakshmi Devi came to him, and she was holding something, and he looked at it, and as the goddess got closer, he saw that Lakshmi Devi had a baby in her hands, and she offered the baby to him, and Kaikusha was a baby. Family obligations is what I want to get rid of. I mean, you're offering me a baby? He didn't want a baby. So Lakshmi Devi said to him, well, what do you want? He said, well, I want to win the horse races. I want to win the lottery so he could get money and everything. And Lakshmi Devi says to him, this is the lottery. And he says, what? She said, and Lakshmi Devi says, this baby is very, very special. Everything you want regarding spirituality, you will get through her. And she offered the baby to Kaikushu, and he was kind of stuck in a dilemma. What does he do? Here the goddess is offering this to me, but I don't want any family obligations. He decides to take it, and as he reaches for the baby, his hands, down to his elbows on both hands, turn to silver. And he takes the baby, and he looks at the baby, and the baby's so beautiful, so lively, so active. And if any of you have met Khorshed, you know, lively, active. This was Khorshed, and full of heart. First and foremost, full of heart. So he's very intrigued. He asks her, what's the name of this baby? And she tells him, Khorshed Banu. And so he agrees to it, and then he wakes up. And he's upset, okay, when he wakes up, because he blew it. He didn't make it the 40 days. He'd gotten so close, and what did he get? He got a baby. So he's upset. He tells his wife, I need to get a walk. I need to get out of here. So he walks out of the house. He walks out of the circle, walks out of the house. He walks down the road, and there's this gentleman coming on the other side of the road. And the guy, and as they pass each other, the gentleman says to him, would you like to be my partner? Kaikushu says, what? And the guy says, I have a jewelry shop in the Fort District in Bombay. I have 11 boys working for me, and I need a partner.
Wow.
And Kaikushu accepts, and this is how the family got very wealthy, because it was a very successful jewelry shop. And it turned out that Kaikushu had a talent for designing jewelry, and his designs were unique and recognized all across the city. So, and once the family had wealth, Kaikushu could take time off because he was the designer. He would go to see Sai Baba of Shirdi, he'd go to see the other perfect masters. But when he met Upasni Maharaj, he knew that that was the link that he needed, and he kept on, he went only to Sakori and to Upasni Maharaj at that point in time. Yes?
Was it a random man that just came up out of nowhere and said, you want to be my partner, or do they know each other?
They didn't know each other. Yeah, and he just asked him. Very, very, yeah, curious. Yeah. And so, this connection to Sakori and Upasni Maharaj was how Kaikushu drew his extended family toward the perfect masters and to Baba. So Kaikushu was the one who actually introduced Gulmai to Upasni Maharaj. And it's through that link that they met Baba, because Baba was there coming down from the plains, and they had met Baba that way. And so all through Khorshed's years growing up, she heard stories, because Kaikushu would be there and talk about this beautiful Persian boy who was with Upasni Maharaj and was his chief disciple, and how much love Baba had for Upasni, and how much love Upasni had for him. And Khorshed, every time she heard this, she was so interested, so curious, and she wanted to meet him. She longed to meet him. So, in 1922, this is after Baba had spent the 7 years coming down from the plains. He was starting his mission, and what he wanted as his first and foremost thing was to celebrate Upasni Maharaj's birthday in a grand style, grand scale. So they asked Gulmai, because Gulmai's family was fairly wealthy too. She had married the other Kaikushu, Kansahib, who was Adi's father, who actually had Mehrabad, right? That was where Mehrabad was originally owned by Gulmai's family. Her husband had bought it at auction from the British, because it had been an old military base. And then Sunamasi's family had money, so they were bringing all these supplies, just firecrackers, gas lanterns, all kinds of prasad, bags of prasad for this grand celebration, decorations, everything. They had gotten it all loaded up, and they brought it on the train. And Baba had reserved a whole car for him and his mandali. on the train. Anyway, so Khorshed is on the platform in Ahmednagar waiting for the train. She cannot wait. When's it coming? When's it coming? She's asking Gulmai every 5 minutes, when's it coming? And Gulmai's like, settle down a little bit, please. And when's it coming, right? And so finally, the train, after all this anticipation, and years it's been of anticipation for Khorshed, after all this anticipation, the train finally pulls up. And Khorshed is like a,
Wow.
just a rocket trying to get on the train. And so she's going to the train, and there's this lady in the way sitting on the steps. And she goes, "Where's Marilyn?" And the lady goes, she points to the bogie a little bit farther. Turns out that lady that was sitting on the steps was shearing my Baba's mother. So Khorshed gets in the train, and she's making her way through the crowds, right? And she gets to the bogie, and then she sees him, and she's just struck. She says to herself, "Oh, truly, everything my father said about his beauty was an understatement." All these years of my life have been wasted until seeing him. Just a satisfaction came over her heart and peace, and she felt finally that this was what she was meant. This was who she was meant to see.
At what age? This was 12?
12,
Amazing.
Wow.
Amazing.
right?
All my years have been wasted.
Yeah.
Can you imagine?
Wow.
And so she had to go up to see Baba. She said, and Baba said, "Who are you?" And she said, I'm Adi's cousin." "Very good, sit down." So she sat down on the train near Baba. She couldn't take her eyes off of him. And as the train would go from stop to stop on its way to Sikori, Baba would get out and play ball with the mandali. And she was just taken. But it was a long train ride, and eventually Khorshed, she kept trying to move to a seat nearer to Baba, and she got tired, so she laid down on the floor at his feet. And anyway, when she woke up, he wasn't there. But when they arrived, and so they arrived at Sikori, and everybody got off the train. They unloaded the stuff, and at Sikori, how many people have been to Sikori? So it's built up, right? There's a whole ashram for Upasni Maharaj now. It's beautiful, right? But at that time, there was nothing. There was like nothing. They had no transportation. There were 3 tongas. They had 1 tonga for Shiranmai, 1 tonga for Gulmai, and 1 tonga for Sunamasi and Khorshed. And they loaded all the stuff up and they drove slowly to Sikori. And so when they got there, they put everybody in this long room, and they got everybody settled down. Baba stayed in the same room with all the family, and they had Adi on one side and Gustaji on Baba's other side. And apparently Sarosh, who was also Khorshed's cousin, says to Baba, "Oh, Baba, Khorshed is a very good singer." And so Baba says to Khorshed, "Come along and sing a song." And Khorshed felt so shy. She says, "I was only 12 at the time. I felt so shy, and I was so tired from the journey that she kind of just covered her head and went to sleep." And I don't know, I know so many of you have known the Mandali so much longer than I, but one of the things that has always struck me about the Mandali is they will remember, there's so many things they did for Baba, right, over the years, but they'll always remember that one thing when Baba asked them to do something that they didn't do. Khorshed still remembered that that was the one thing that she hadn't given for Baba, and she regretted it. And that just like blows me away. Yeah. So this is a celebration of Upasni Maharaja's birthday on a grand style. This was multi-day celebration. So they started decorating all of Sakori with the decorations and the gas lights, preparing for the big festival day. And Upasni was just in splendid form. He was spending his nights in the hut, right? He had a hut, and Durgamai was taking care of him and all of that, but he spent his time in his jyoti, and he would come out and be like a family member to everybody. And so Khorshed has this vivid memory of Adi Senior singing, and Baba came and was playing the dolak drum, and then Upasni Maharaj came by and played the air sitar. The air sitar, right? So apparently he was doing all kinds of tricks with the sitar, in the air, and they were having just a really close, intimate family time. And Khorshed was in heaven. She just loved it. There was Merwan, Upasni she had known for years and just loved him, and her whole family was there. What was incredibly significant about that time is the day that they celebrated Upasni Maharaja's birthday. Upasni had asked Gulmai Suna and Shireen Mai to make these budgies. They're little fried,
Delicious.
pardon? Yeah, little fried patties, and Upasni had given very specific instructions. The chickpea flour, and Upasni had given very specific instructions to add neem tree leaves to the bhajia mix. Now this was very unusual. Nobody cooks with neem leaves because they're so bitter. But that was his instruction. And so those ladies had gotten up early, they bathed to be pure. This is a purification ritual to be ready to make these things for Baba, for Upasni. And they had made baskets of bhajia so he could give them out as prasad. The bhajia were ready. Upasni came out of his jyoti, and everybody was in the prayer hall. And Upasni was there, the bhajia was there, and everybody was waiting for some kind of announcements from Upasni. And Khorshed was waiting, and she's thinking, but where's Merwan? And they called him Merwan back in those days. This was before he started his mission. Where's Merwan? And then from the side, Merwan comes in, and Khorshed remembers him walking in so beautifully. And he comes up to Upasni and kneels down and bows to Upasni's feet. And Khorshed was, oh, look at how humble he is. Truly, Upasni chose the right person to be his chief disciple. And Upasni started out and said, close the doors. I have something very important to tell you all. I want you all to know that I have given Merwan my spiritual key. He is the avatar. And I want you all to go follow him. From now on, don't come to me for spiritual matters. Go to him. Later on, I may tell you things. I may say different things. I may say that Merwan never got anything from me, that he's not a master, whatever. Don't listen to that. Listen to what I'm telling you now. He is the avatar of the age. Merwan will make the whole world dance on his little finger. So go to him. And then he gave out the bhajia and told everybody to leave. But that was the announcement that Merwan was the avatar of the age. And then they all had to leave. They all had to leave. And this was this was heartbreaking for Khorshed for a couple of reasons. First, it was being parting from Baba and Upasni, which was very hard for her. But what happened as people were leaving is that they were loading up the carts to get back to the train station. And as they were leaving, because Suna Masi, her mother, was right in front of her, and Baba grabs her hand as she's leaving, and he says to Suna, "Would you like to come and live with me?"
Oh, God.
Suna says, "What? How? Would you like to come and live with me?" And she said, "Baba, Marwan, how? You're moving from here to there all the time. Not now, later. I will settle down in a place. Would you come to stay with me?" She said, "I'd be delighted." No, really, would you like to come and live with me, to stay in my ashram and all of that?" "Baba, it would be my pleasure. Marwan, it would be my pleasure." He asked her 3 times, and then embraced her, and she was on her way. And of course she's thinking, "Oh my God, my mom's gonna go live with Baba. I wonder what he's gonna ask me." And Khorshed goes to embrace Baba, and he says nothing to her. Khorshed was heartbroken, and she starts walking back to and she lingers because she's like waiting for him to ask, and anyway she has to be moved along, and she's walking and she's starting to cry because her mom's going to go and not her. She just can't bear it. And Gulmai sees this and she says, "You're crying, why?" "Because Marwan asked my mother to live with him, and he said nothing to me." Gulmai says, "Oh, well, when she goes, you go also. So why cry? Don't." And that was it, They get on the carts and she's all happy now. And they go away. So that was that story.
That's neat.
That's a great story.
So, any stories besides the Ishtiaki one that anyone's thinking of?
You wanted to tell us about how Baba loved
Flowers, that was the one I was thinking of. So, yes. So Mara met Baba. There was a lot of stuff, a lot of things happening, right? Munsley Meme. They went back to Bombay. Baba was in Munsley Meme. He closed up Munsley Meme. He started to do traveling to Persia. Khurshid was on his I believe it was the second trip to Persia. Khurshid went on that second trip to Persia. And I'm going to, there's a very interesting story about the way back on that one. Let's go to the flower story first. So Mera met Baba. They came to Kushru quarters. They were making all of these shirts for the Ahmednagar villagers. They made men's shirts. They made small size, medium size, large size, and these were hand sewn, 500 shirts each. And they had one of those pedal sewing machines, right? And this is what they were doing. And this was kind of, I don't know if Baba said this directly, but the women thought, Mera and Khorshed thought, this is, if we have to do this right, or so we can go be with Baba, otherwise we're not going to be able to be with Baba. And Baba would call them to Mehrabad. Baba was at Mehrabad at this time. Baba would call them to Mehrabad from time to time. "So how's it going? How many shirts have you made?" "We've got this many, Baba." "You need to make more. You need to make more." So he kept on urging them to make more. And so this was quite a work. And the salient detail is the amount of love and focus that they had on Baba every day, making those shirts so that they could be with him. And eventually, they took the shirts to Mehrabad, the shirts were distributed with prasad to all of the Ahmednagar folks, and it was a celebration. And then they got to move into the post office. And I'm skipping ahead. From the post office they shifted to the bathing rooms, and it's at that point that Kaikhushru and Suna were also living in Mehrabad. So Mera, Khorshed, Naja, and some other ladies were in the bathing rooms. Kaikhushru, Khorshed's father and mother were living where Ted and Janet were actually, around the corner.
Oh.
And Baba went into seclusion. And nobody could see Baba or talk to Baba except for Kaikhushru. Actually, this may have been post-1925. So every morning, but Kaikhushru was asked to go to see Baba every morning at 7 o'clock. And Khorshed knew this. And one of the things that was so vital about Khorshed and so real was she was always thinking about Baba, always trying to come up with a way that she could show her love for Baba. When he was in seclusion, it was he was constantly on her mind. She wanted to come up with ways to get Baba to remember them, to know, to hear. She wanted to make that connection so badly. And so Khorshed was generally the instigator on a number of crazy schemes. And so this one was, how can we get him to remember us? How can we show our love for him? And so she comes up with this plan about making some garlands for Baba. But how? They were confined to this area around the bathing rooms. They had a tata matting, right? They had a fenced compound. They couldn't go outside of that. They had no money to buy flowers. So where are they going to get the flowers? So they come up with this idea. One of the ladies, she's not a servant, but she was helpful. Do you remember her name? It starts with a V, was it?
Oh, with a V?
Pardon?
Starts with a what?
V, perhaps?
Yeah.
Oh,
Not Durgavai.
no. Valu.
Yeah.
Valu.
Yeah.
So she actually was an Arangan woman who cared for the Mandali. And when Mani was asked about Valu and people were referring to her as a servant woman, Mani said no. She was not a servant. She was one of us. But she had the freedom because she was living in Arangan with her family, and so she could go and come. And so the girls came up with this idea. Oh, Valu, could you get us some flowers? And Valu knew of a place, a dried up riverbank that had these oleander flowers. So she went and picked oleander flowers and brought them to the women, a big bunch of oleander flowers. And so the girls started sewing a big garland for Baba. They made a crown for him out of the flowers, wristlets, ankle cuffs, and they were making this. Mera did the design, and they made these things with all this love for Baba, and they worked until 2 a.m. by candlelight. Okay, so no electricity, right? So they're sewing these flowers, threading needles by candlelight.
Wow.
Right? And of course they were staying up past the time that Baba had told them to go to bed. Right, so that's a leading fact. Spoiler alert, right? No, anyway. So they made these things and they wrapped them all so carefully. And now Khurshid's like, how can we get these to Baba? How can we get these to Baba? Because we're stuck in this compound. My father goes to see Baba. So, the next morning, before he goes, Khorshed goes over to see Kaikushu, and she says to Kaikushu, because Khorshed knows Baba's ways, right? So she tells Kaikushu, she gives him very specific instructions on how to present the flowers to Baba. Here, this is a basket. We want you to take this up to Baba. She didn't tell her father what was in the basket. Don't give it to Baba. But when you go to see him, put it within his field of vision so he can see it, but don't say anything about it. Because Khorshed knew that Baba would ask about this basket, because he's so curious, right? He wants to know everything. So don't tell him, and then he will be interested. So put the basket in his field of vision, and just leave it there, and then go to see him. So Kaikushu did exactly what he asked, because he knows his daughter. He needs to listen, right? So he puts the basket there, and then he goes and he has his darshan with Baba and his conversation, and he doesn't say anything about the basket, and then he turns to walk away, and Baba claps. So it was after 25. So Baba claps, and Kaikushu turns around, and Baba asks him, what's in the basket? What's this basket? And Kaikushu said, I have no idea. Khorshed gave it to me. I don't know anything about it. Bring it here, bring it here. So Kaikushu brings the basket, and Baba starts unwrapping the basket and sees the flowers, and he gets this big, beautiful smile on his face. He said, where did these come from? Who made them? How, they're so beautiful. I want to know everything. And Kaikushu says, I don't know anything about it. Khorshed gave the basket to me. Well, go find out and tell me tomorrow. So Kaikushu comes down the hill, and Baba, of course, because he couldn't be touched that time, he puts the crown on his head, he puts the anklet, he garlands himself and puts them all on, and he's just delighted. He's just so happy. He feels all the love from the women. And Kaikushu comes down the hill, and of course Khurshid's waiting there to find out what happened. And Kaikushu tells him, Baba was delighted. He just loved it. He wants to know everything. Tell me every detail. How did you make them? Where did you get the flowers? And the girls just so delighted that Baba was thinking about them and hearing that he cared about them and loved the flowers. It was everything to them. And so Kaikushu took notes and learned all the details, and then went back up to tell Baba the next day about how they made it, how they stayed into the night till 2 a.m., how they threaded the needles by candlelight, how they got the flowers from the riverbed that Valu had brought them, all of it. And Baba was delighted until he heard that they stayed up past their curfew. And he said, no, you tell them they have to go to bed at 10 o'clock, they cannot stay up. Maybe they can stay up till 11, but not past that. And so, anyway, Kaikushu came with that message, and they were just delighted that in seclusion he remembered them. And after that, Baba asked Kaikushu to get word of how the girls were and what they were doing, and bring that news from every day. And so they had that, and then Kaikushu told the girls what Baba said, so they made that connection, and it meant everything to Khorshed. I have no idea about time, so if somebody can...
Almost 20 after 11.
20 after 11, 20, okay. One more story. Yes, this is an important one. So, I said I was putting a placeholder on the return trip from Persia, because this is where things, being with Baba is not all flowers and prasad, right? There's the tough times too. So, on the way back from Persia, Baba sends the men are going to make a foot journey and it's decided that that's too rough for the women. So he sends Gulmai, Khorshed, and Sunamasi back to Kushu quarters to stay. And Baba says to Sunamasi and Khorshed, go to Ahmednagar and do not set foot out of Ahmednagar. Even if the sky falls, do not leave Ahmednagar. Okay. So they go to Ahmednagar, they get to Kushu quarters, and they stay there, because that's Gulmai's home, it's their relatives, you know, in the Indian way, that's totally natural. Kaikushu, Khorshed's father, had wanted to go on the trip, but he was not allowed. His family was very much against Baba. Kaikushu had made some donations to Baba earlier, and the family was worried about the money going to Baba, and so they were very much against Baba. They were very much against spiritual masters in general, but when it came to the money going, they were very much concerned. So they leaned on Kaikushu to not have affiliation with Baba, and they kept him. And in order to appease the family, which Kaikushu felt obligated to do, he stayed behind. So anyway, 2 days after they arrive, a telegram comes to Suna. Kaikushu is ill. Come back to Bombay right away. Well, Suna remembers Baba's order, and she talks to Khorshed about it, of course, but they take the telegram, crinkle it up, throw it away. 2 days later, another telegram comes. Come soon. Kaikushu's condition is serious. You must come back to Bombay right away. And Suna is thinking, this is bogus. They're just trying to get us back to Bombay. He's not sick. And again, talks to Khorshed about it. And they decide to throw it away. 2 days later, a third telegram comes. But this time it doesn't go to Suna, it goes to Khan Sahib, Gulmai's husband. And if any of you have seen pictures of Khan Sahib, this is a big guy. This is a big guy with a big mustache. And he's a real powerful guy. And he gets this, and he had a hot temper. So he comes storming across the compound. And he says, have you gotten telegrams to go back to Bombay? Yes, we did. And you're still here? Why didn't you go? Now, here's Suna. This is 1925 or 27 or whatever it is, right? It's early 20s. This is India. This is not emancipated women are equal to men. This is Khan Sahib's house. This is a different time. And Khan Sahib is shouting at them that you need to leave.
Wow.
Now, at this time, and they knew that you do not talk about Baba's orders to anyone. You just keep them to yourself. So they couldn't even say to him,
Wow.
Baba ordered us to stay. They just took it, right? The fire. And Suna said, I'm not feeling well. I can't travel. What? Your husband is dying in Bombay and you're not leaving? He was furious.
Wow.
And no, I'm not. I can't travel. And then he turns to Khorshed, and what about you? Right? And she says, I can't leave without my mother. Anyway. So he does not understand women. He just storms back across the compound back to where he lived, we were staying. And it was a scary time.
And it was bogus. It was bogus.
Let me finish. So anyway, at that point, a few days later, Baba shows up in Ahmednagar. and he calls. He just coincidentally showed up in Ahmednagar, and he calls Suna and Khorshed to him, and he greets them and says, I hear that Kaikushu is not well. Why are you here in Ahmednagar? And they're a little bit, they don't know exactly what to do. And Suna says, because they don't want to embarrass Baba, Suna says, I wasn't feeling well. I couldn't travel. Really? Your husband's dying and you're not traveling?
Oh, he's so funny.
And then he looks at Khorshed, and what about you? And Khorshed, she just doesn't say anything for a minute. And then Baba goes back to Suna and asks her again, but why didn't you go? When he asked you, why didn't you go? He asks her a third time, and Khorshed, she just can't take it anymore. She says, because of your order.
Wow.
Baba says, what? Because of your order, you told us not to leave Ahmednagar, not to set a foot outside of Ahmednagar, even if the sky falls. That's why we stayed. And Baba kind of smiles and said, what? You remembered that? Khorshed says, what else can we do but remember your words, your order? You mean my order meant that much to you? Of course. What else would we do? And Baba is very happy. He's gets beaming, and he embraces them both. He said, Kaikushu is fine, will be fine. Had you left, he would have died.
Wow.
But go now and
Isn't that something?
see him and take him to Pune, and I will meet you there
Wow.
soon.
How cool.
And the story goes on, of course, but we'll leave it with that.
Who was it that was calling them? I mean, writing them?
The brother, it was Kaikushu's brother.
His brother.
Yeah.
Wow.
So,
Was he really sick?
yes.
He was sick.
So anyway, Avatar, may your
Yeah,
Baba
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Certainly it is foolish to rely upon the usual religious practices and ritual. What matters is your heart, the prayer that arises from your heart. That is the prayer that Baba hears, that God hears. The ideal prayer to the Lord is nothing more than spontaneous praise of His being. You praise Him, not in the spirit of bargain, but in the spirit of self-forgetfulness. Once again, I feel like these quotes are really great for a talk about Khorshed. I was talking last night with Patrick about Khorshed, and we were talking about divine feminine, divine masculine, and I thought, divine this, divine that, I don't know, but what I can say about Khorshed with 100% confidence is that what was so special about Khorshed was the childlike, innocent, pure, and uncompromising, no sacrifice too great focus on her Lord, Meher Baba. The bar none, that is it. And if I hope for those who read this book and about her life with Meher Baba, you hear that. Before I tell some stories, I'd be happy to answer any questions that people have that have come up.
When I used to see Khorshed, she was just this very backgroundy type, silent, or smiley person. What was her actual role there? Did she have a defined role as one of the women on the tasks that she would regularly perform?
In the early years, Khorshed was very close and very much involved. She was Mara's best friend, and many of the charming, delightful times with Baba in the early years, Khorshed participated in. Perhaps she came up with the idea. For example, so Khorshed had gone to Manzili Min many times. In fact, it was an order that Baba gave that she and her family would come to Manzili Min every day. And on one of the days, and there was this disciple, this lover of Baba, who was Muslim. His name was Munshi Rahim, and if I'm mispronouncing the name, forgive me. Anyway, this fellow was involved in rebuilding Bombay. I don't know if you know this, but Bombay was actually 7 land, kind of islands, and it was kind of a swamp. Perhaps you've smelled it when you've gotten off the plane. The first time I went to India, I did. Anyway, that got all filled in, and he and his construction company, the one that he belonged to, was responsible for building Marine Drive and for filling in all that area of Bombay, which is now Bombay and got built on. They had given him, the government had given him a house on the coast in Bombay, and he would have Baba over for lunch and disciples to come over, and they would sing bhajans, and it was an enjoyable time for Baba, and because of all the lovers and everything. It was a great setting, right? A wonderful home. Anyway, on one of those days, Khorshed got to come, but because the men and women were segregated, Khorshed got to sit outside with Gustaji, and Khorshed talked about how she placed herself so that she could see Baba through the doorway inside and watch him as he was enjoying the qawwalis and songs. So that after the songs and after the program, they had lunch, and the Muslim worshippers, they brought a pitcher of water so that Baba could wash his hands, but they had a sheet underneath it, so the water would pour through, and soapy water Baba would have soap, they'd pour water on his hands, and the particles that were on his hands that he had eaten from went into the sheet. And they brought the sheet out, and then the people who had the sheet, they took little food particles as prasadam.
Sweet.
Now Khorshed, mind you, is the woman who saw lint on the seat that Baba had. There'd be lint there, and she would grab it and save it. This is Khorshed, okay? So, Khorshed's the woman who, when she and Mara were combing Baba's hair and they found a lice in Baba's hair, she picked that out and saved it for years in a matchbox. This is Khorshed. So Khorshed, right. So Khorshed sees these people picking the little prasad. When I said no sacrifice too great for her, this is what I'm saying. So Khorshed, when she sees the people taking the little prasad out of the sheet and eating it, she's like, oh, this is, they love Baba 100%. This is very good, right? So years later, she's at the post office with Mara, and Baba, of course, came for lunch. And they would pour water over Baba's hands, and then they would just throw it out into the garden. Or they'd just throw it out. And one day Khorshed said, you know, we are not loving Baba 100%. And who's there, right? It's Gulmai, it's Mara's mother, Dalatmai, it's Mara, it's Naja. And Khorshed starts, and all of them are older than her, right? And Khorshed starts lecturing them, you people, we are not loving Baba 100%. And they're hurt. Khorshed, what do you mean? What do you mean we don't love Baba 100%? Of course we do. No. Those Muslim Baba followers of Baba, what they would do is we just take that hand washing water and we throw it out. They took the hand washing water and they took the particles, and she tells them the whole story. And they're very much impressed. So they say, Khorshed, what should we do? And Khorshed says, well, when Baba washes his hands, instead of throwing out the water, let's save it and let's drink it. As prasad.
Oh.
And everybody's like, yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. So Baba would be come, have his lunch, they'd pour that water over his hands, and then Baba would leave. And after he left, they'd get special little glasses, and they'd divvy it out, equal portions for everybody, and then they'd drink it. And Khorshed talks about how, it felt so good. It felt so good. We are loving Baba 100%, and we're taking this as his prasad, and we love him, and that was it.
Yeah.
So they started doing this, and Khorshed says, I don't know, we did it for 3 weeks, a month. Anyway, usually when Baba had lunch and he would leave, he'd just leave and go back up the hill, right? But one day, instead of going up the hill, Baba comes back inside, and they're holding their glasses, getting ready to drink. And Baba says, what are you doing? And they're like, uh-oh. Busted. Uh-oh. No, what are you doing? And Khorshid's like, and so Baba asks the third time, what are you doing? And Mara says, Baba, we wanted to love you, show our love for you 100%. Your Muslim lovers love you 100%. And Khorshed had this idea about how we can show our love for you 100%.
What did they like?
And Khorshed's like, and Baba didn't say anything. He's just looking at them, stunned, like,
What's wrong with you?
yeah, what's wrong with you? And of course, it's thinking, well, maybe I thought I might get in trouble, but then she said, but Baba didn't say anything. He just says, no, you. So has anybody gotten sick? He was concerned about their health. Sure. No, Baba, we all feel, nobody has gotten sick. Nobody threw up or anything. Everybody's been fine. No, Baba, everybody has been fine. In fact, we feel so good because we're loving you, showing our love for you so much. And Baba said, well, no, don't do this anymore. Don't do this anymore. But Baba, how can we don't just want to throw out the water, we want to show our love for you. We don't want to, he said, I understand. So maybe take the water and put it by the plants. Use it to water the plants instead of just throwing it out. That will be loving me 100%. And they felt so nice, so good. Yeah. And Khorshed was relieved. She didn't get in any trouble. So that, and then Baba went on his business. So that was just one example. So great question, thank you. Does anybody have any other questions? Larry?
It's not a question, but this story of Khorshed drinking that water reminds me of St. Francis, who was very, I don't know how can you say, meticulous as he was growing up. And then when he started loving God and he started begging, he was eating any kind of food. And he would run away when he heard the sound of the lepers, but then he wanted to love Christ 100%. And so he approached the leper. One leper was coming close to him, and finally was able to embrace him and kiss him. And eventually he would go and wash them. And so that was his way of washing Christ and loving Christ 100%. So the two stories in my mind are similar.
Any other questions?
Yes. What was the relationship between Khorshed
and her adopted son, Sudan, is that?
Well, the servant, yeah.
How did that come about?
That's a great question,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish Sudan was here. But what I understand is that Sudan's grandmother was actually lived in Ahmednagar, of course, and she was a Baba lover. And when Sudan was in his teenage years, she talked to, and getting jobs was not easy, so she talked to Adi Sr. about, is there some kind of job that my grandson could do, could you help us find one for him? And Sudan came into working at Mayor Nazar, and eventually got assigned to helping take care of Khorshed in Bombay. And this was before he was married, and so he was living there, and as a servant, as someone who helped out, and then after he got married, Asha also took on that role, and when Khorshed moved to Mayor Nazar, they all moved back, and then they had the family and all of that. And and the relationship was very close. Khorshed and the women would be in one room, sleep in one room. Sudan would sleep in the other. There are some beautiful pictures of Khorshed and the women Mandali being there for Mira and Darshana's birthday parties when they were little kids. It's really quite cute. Yeah, they were very, so it's family. So, back to the one-pointed love for Baba. In fact, the whole family loved Baba so much. Kaikushu, her father, Sunamasi, her mother, and Khorshed. And I think I told you last time that when Suna was leaving that grand celebration of Upasni Maharaj's birthday in 1922, that Baba had asked Suna to come and live with him. And so Suna was part of the ashram. But did you know that out of all of the women Mandali that are buried right near Baba's tomb, Suna is the only one that was married?
Wow, interesting.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, is she right in the row there?
She's next to Kitty, I think. She's
Wow.
on Mara's side.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, which I find to be interesting. So, I think I mentioned to you that the family was not crazy about having Kaikushu be with Baba. And I think I'd mentioned the story about him, actually, the part of it was about money. So early on, what had happened was, after Kaikushu had become a jeweler, he became a very well-known designer because his designs were very unique, and he was very talented at this. And because he was a jeweler, they had developed these, he had done a lot of creations, and you accumulate jewelry, right, as a jeweler. And so he had accumulated a lot of jewelry, and Kaikushu wanted to give this wealth to Baba. So what he did is he put all of his jewelry in a box. It was an ornate, strong box. And he came to Baba at Mehrabad, and he said, Baba, I want to give all of my wealth, my family, all of it to you. And he laid it all at his feet. And it was considerable. And Baba said, what is this? So Kaikushu opened the box and showed him all of the jewels. And Baba said, this box full of jewelry and gold and all that. And Baba said, what am I going to do with this? And Kaikushu said, it's yours, Baba. What do you want me to do with it? Well, go sell it in the market. So Kaikushu takes the jewelry and goes and sells it in the market of Bombay. And when that happens, and he raises a lot of money, and a lot of the buildings at early Mehrabad were built using this money, right? Hospital, Kaikushu funded a lot of that stuff. And Kaikushu had given Suna and Khorshed in Baba's service at that time. That's significant. And back to the story. So what happened was Kaikushu's partner and his family started seeing Kaikushu's designs showing up all over Bombay. And they figured out what had happened. Oh my God, he sold the jewels and gave the money to Mayor Baba. We got to put a stop to it. They were very upset. They were worried that the money was good, that Kaikushu was going to give him all his money, and then what was going to happen to them? So the family started putting pressure on Kaikushu to not get involved, not be around Meher Baba, and to appease them, to show them that he wasn't going AWOL. Kaikushu would not follow Khorshed and Suna when they went to see Meher Baba all the time. And this caused this great strain on Kaikushu. In fact, he was ill a lot of the time, which was that story that I told you before. And the connection, of course, continued through the 20s and into the 30s, where the family was just so close. And Khorshed spent a lot of time at Mehrabad with Baba. And as it so happened, by Baba's order, when Baba was in Nasik, Baba had asked for Kaikushu specifically to come to Nasik. And the family had kind of escaped Bombay and escaped the relatives. Because there was a tug of war going on throughout the years, them trying to get away from the family, to be with Baba. That's all they wanted to do, that one focus. And they finally broke free. They escaped to Nasik. They left all the wealth in Bombay. They left it all with the family. They left it with the partner. They left it all. But of course, Kaikushu was still the owner of it. Right? But they ran away. They came to Bombay. They had nothing, and Baba took care of them. Baba set them up in a house. They had their own house. They got to see Baba when he was in Nasik. They had a very pleasant life. So Baba had given Kaikushu an order for his health to take a walk every day, for about a half hour, to walk around Nasik. And he gave Suna an order to never leave Kaikushu alone. Do not leave him alone. When he goes on his walks, you go with him. So one day, that Kaikushu's sister, Motibai, comes to Nasik. They had run away, it had been some months, and Motibai comes to visit the family. They want to see how they're doing. She wants to see how they're doing, and she's received well. She has a very good attitude. They serve her tea. They talk. Oh, how's Kaikushu doing? Oh, he's doing great. His health has improved a great deal. You don't have to worry about him. What do you do all day? Oh, they tell, well, we do this and we do that. And Kaikushu goes for a walk. Oh, where does he go for a walk? He goes from here to here. Goes up by Sarosh Motor Works, and then he comes back. What time does he do that? Oh, about 10:30 every morning. They tell him the whole story, and then she leaves. Suna and Kaikushu felt very good about the visit because it had gone so well. No acrimony, no, you shouldn't have left Bombay, none of that stuff. It was all fine. They were very happy about it. They thought, it's fine. And so Khorshed, of course, was happy. Anyway, Baba is getting ready to leave for another trip, and I can't remember exactly where he's going. And when he is ready for that trip, he tells the family, do not set foot outside of Nasik. Even if the sky falls, do not leave Nasik. And then he leaves. Some days go by, and Kaikushu is going out for his walk, And Suna has pain in her stomach, severe pain. She starts bleeding. And so she has to stop. She can't go on the walk. She cannot walk. So she decides to stay. Kaikushu says, that's okay, Baba has given me the order to go on the walk, I'm going to go on the walk. And as Kaikushu is walking, what happens? He doesn't come back. He doesn't come back, and nobody knows where he's gone. And so they start to get panicked. Where's Kaikushu? Has he fallen ill? Has he gotten killed on the side? What happened to him? They're trying to find out. They don't know where he's gone. The family is really worried. They don't know. And somebody at Sarosh Motorworks said, oh, I think I saw Kaikushu walking, and two men got out of a car and they helped Kaikushu get in a car, and then they drove off. Didn't he come home? And the answer was no, he didn't come home. Actually, what happened was his brother and his partner had kidnapped Kaikushu, and they took him to Bombay. And so they didn't know what to do. They didn't know that those were the men, right? But a couple days later, they got a note that was written ostensibly in Kaikushu's hand saying, I'm fine, I'm in Bombay, you don't need to worry about me. And that was it.
What do you mean that was it? You guys are
No, that was all, no, the story's not done. The story's not done, it's okay. Yeah. So what to do? Sarosh, Rustam, they're there, and Rustam is very upset. This is Adi's brother. Rustam's very upset. You need to go to, he says to Suna, you need to go to Bombay right away. They've kidnapped him, they're trying to get his money. You need to go right away and bring him back. And Suna, and nobody knows the order that Suna and Khorshed have. And she says, no, I'm not going to go. What? You're not going to go? You need to go and get Kaikushu. He is in trouble. They're going to try to use whatever means they need to get his money. And she said, no, we're not going to go. So they don't go. And Kaikushu is left to the family. This story doesn't end happily, by the way. So just be ready for that. So they are wondering what to do, and Baba comes back. Rustam calls Baba, of course, and Baba comes back, and they say, what should we do? And Baba tells them not to go. And what's happening is the family has locked Kaikushu in a closet. And they put this will in front of him to have him sign. They're trying to get him to sign over all of his wealth to them. And he does his best to resist. But they keep putting the will in front of him and saying, sign this and you can go, sign this and you can go. And so finally he decides to sign it, but he can't go. Because if they let him go, he could change the will. So they hold him for a year. They hold him for a year. And after the year, the family in Bombay has him write a letter to say, if you love God, have love for God, come and get me. And Suna shows the letter to Baba, And Baba says, no, go get him. And bring him back to Mehrabad. So, I want to share how heartbroken Suna and Khorshed were during this time with Kaikushu Way. They loved Kaikushu, and he loved them. They were very, very close. But Baba's order was not to go, and they did not go. Baba's order was to stay with them, and they stayed. And he was there, and he suffered. So the family kept him in Bombay in a closet. And then they came back, they came to get him, his health was broken. He was a wreck with all the worry. And they came, they got him, they took him by train to Mehrabad. The scene, the setting was, they came, Suna and Khorshed came, the family said, oh, why don't you just come in and stay, and we'll offer you, would you like some tea, would you like it? And Khorshed's like, she said no. No, we came for our father, we came for my father, we're taking them. But how will you go? Let us drive you to the train station. No, we're leaving. She was not nice. They got on the train. How can you handle him? Don't worry, we'll take him. So they took him on the train to Mehrabad to see Baba. And Kaikushu was very, very frail. He was very ill. And he came to Mehrabad. He was received by Baba, and Baba embraced him so lovingly. And Kaikushu was, but I signed away all of my wealth for them. There's nothing left for Khorshed. There's nothing left for Suna. I feel so horrible. Baba said, don't worry about it. And Baba cared for him very tenderly. And Kaikushu had and even though he did, Kaikushu couldn't give up that feeling of having let down the family. One of the good things that he had done is he had bargained for a small trust fund for Khorshed and Suna for any medical problems, and a small stipend, but the rest of the money the family took, which was considerable, they took it all.
Wow.
And so Kaikushu was there in Mehrabad, and his health got progressively worse. He died in Baba's arms.
Oh.
One of the very few people who died in Baba's arms. I think I'll leave it there with that.
It's a good place to leave it.
Yeah. There are other details about the story that are in the book, but I think I'll just leave that with that. I wanted to share with you the challenges and the trials and tribulations that the family faced, because they were considerable. Khorshed did not go with Baba on the new life, which was heartbreaking. Baba sent her to Bombay to live with Meherji and Meherji's family, which was very hard and very difficult. Khorshed's parting and being separated from Baba was excruciating for her. The love that she had, the one-pointed love, and for her to be separated from her beloved and from her best friend was excruciating in the later years, which defines the new life on. So I want you to understand that life, and she lived under Baba's orders that whole time, and this is the soul. This is the soul that we're talking about in this book, and these are the stories of her. So I want to get that point across so you know this is someone, this is a special soul. That, one day in her shoes, not many of us could walk. I know I couldn't. Many of you know Khorshed to be someone who liked food, perhaps. Well, Khorshed wasn't always that way. When she was quite young, in fact, she didn't eat anything except boiled eggs. That was the only thing that she would eat. And when she first came to Baba, eggs, yeah. And in fact, you know Khorshed, the strength of Khorshed, and so she would refuse to eat what they served. And of course, all of the aunties were, no, you've got to eat this stuff. You've got to eat all this good food we're serving. She would say, no. Okay, we're not going to give you any food. Fine. We're not even going to give you an egg. Fine. And she'd march off to her room. So Khorshed, the first time she went to Muslim, and she was there after school, it was 4 o'clock. And she was staying with Gustaji. And what happened was at 6 o'clock, the bell would ring. And what was that? What was the dinner bell? And Khorshed was like, Khorshed, this is her first time, and she's like, well, I don't know Baba's served. I don't know what's being served, but I know I'm not going to like it, right? Whatever it is. And Gustav says to her, hey, Khorshed, here, have a plate. Go have some food. And Khorshed says, I already ate. How she'd come back right after school, I don't know, but that's what she said. Anyway, there was kind of silence. There was a big veranda around Muslimi. And so it was kind of quiet out there, and she knew Baba was out there. She knew all the men Mandali were out there, but so she got a little bit curious. What's going on out there? So she takes a look outside the door, and what she sees is all the Mandali lined up, and with their plates. And what was happening? Baba was serving them food with his own hand. He was taking a scoop out and putting it on their plate with his own hand. And Khorshed, loving Baba, said, all of these people getting food by Baba's hand, and she said, and I not, we wrote it differently in the book. She said, and I not? That's not going to happen. She got jealous. She went over to Gustav, she said, give me that plate. We can't, in the book you cannot get the kind of expression, the kind of tone. Of course, it was like, give me that plate. So she marched out there, and she had her plate. She was ready. Baba was there. She was looking at him. Oh, so beautiful. And there he was serving the food. And he takes this big scoop out of the pot, and he puts it on her plate. And he says to her, now you eat all of that. And she looks at him and she goes, and what was it? She says, cauliflower. Now there's a lot of things that I didn't like, but cauliflower was the one that she didn't like the most. But she said, but Baba told me I had to eat all of it. Had to. So for Baba, she ate every bit of it. And what happened was, she started liking cauliflower. And every day they would serve a different thing. And Khorshed started eating it, because it was served by Baba. And she started liking it. So this is how Khorshed started really liking food, as we came to know it in the later years. All right, I'm sure I'm out of time. Thank you all very much, Jane.